Greetings, music fans, or shall I say metal fans. This is Peter Sko for Music is a Journey in Japan. We're going to be taking a look at 12 bands today for the final episode of the year. Let's cue the music. Alright, so here we are at episode 36 of Music is a Journey. Now each year I have been doing basically 12 regular episodes plus some other small videos or extra videos, but basically 12 episodes. So if you quickly do the math, well, 36 episodes, that means this is the end of my third year. Yes, this is the final episode of the third year of Music is a Journey, and as always, I'm going to be, well, yeah, I've been doing it for 3 years now. So anyway, the final episode of each year, I feature 12 bands. Now, in the past 2 years, I have been featuring bands, most of which I have some contact with through Facebook. It all started, you know, with one musician, Colin Tench, and I got to know other musicians through him and then other musicians. And so I mostly feature their works, or occasionally another band I'll ask if it's all right to feature them and use their music. But this year I decided to do something different, and it's all because of a quest that I began way back in May. If you have seen the videos I posted earlier this year, my quest for Canadian metal, I think there were 6 episodes of that, or if you saw the last 2 videos I posted, which were the pre-episode 36 videos, you'll know what it is I've been on about this year. However, if you haven't seen those, I'll explain now. So earlier this year, 3 things happened around the same time. First, I did a series of 3 videos about the Canadian hard rock and heavy metal scene, one from the 70s, one from the 80s, and then another one from the 1990s onward. And it was as I was finishing that last video, the other 2 things happened. First, on the website Quora, I saw a lot of questions coming up about rock or metal being dead, or rock and metal were dying. And I had to wonder, is that really true? There was even some very knowledgeable guy on the internet who did a video and talked about the state of rock and metal, what is happening, how it seems to be dying from a certain perspective, and what it needs to do in order to revive itself. Now, from my perspective, I really couldn't believe it because, I mean, hey, that's what I'm listening to, right? Rock, progressive rock, heavy metal. There seem to be new albums coming out all the time. So I had to wonder, were these new albums mostly by older bands, or were there some newer bands coming out? So that got me thinking about the Canadian scene, and then I watched a Banger TV video with Sarah Kitteringhamn, and she introduced an album that she'd recently bought by a band called Spell. And that was a band out of Vancouver, and I thought the music sounded really unique, and I went out and bought the album and thought it was great. So I started to put my ideas together. What new bands are forming, or what are the younger bands in the heavy metal scene from Canada? And that's what started me on this quest for contemporary Canadian heavy metal. So that's what I decided to do for the final video of the year. Now, originally, I just decided that I would go out and find 5 bands that I hadn't heard of before that were fairly new, and I was going to make a video about those. But of course, as I started looking and researching on the internet, I soon found dozens upon dozens, scores upon scores, hundreds and hundreds of Canadian bands that I had never heard about. And so it quickly got changed into a list of 12 bands. So now let's get started by taking a look at those 12 bands. Now, first of all, I'm going to tell you there were 4 caveats to what I was doing. One, they had to be bands that I didn't already have in my collection. So no Unleash the Archers, no Arcspire, no Ancients, no Beyond Creation. All those bands I already had, can't mention them. Even though Unleash the Archers album this year, Abyss, is really awesome. Okay, next was the fact that I was looking for bands that were relatively new, and I decided to draw the line at the last 10 years, which seems like a lot. But there was a huge kind of metal explosion in Canada in the mid-2000s. So a lot of the bands that I checked out and really liked and whose albums I bought actually formed sometime around 2005, 2006, 2007. So I'm looking for bands that basically formed around 2009 or after and whose discographies are fairly modest, meaning I'm looking for bands that have just 2 or 3 albums, a couple of EPs or whatever, or less. Then the final 2 points are that I'm looking for stylistic diversity. So that means thrash metal, death metal, black metal, power metal, trad metal, hard rock, stoner metal, doom metal, death doom, whatever. I tried to cover a fair range of stuff. Now, the final thing was that I was also looking for regional diversity, and that means I'm looking for bands across the country. And I'll say right up front that the territories, I don't know if I just didn't find the right place, but I only found 2 bands from the territories. One, Bushwhacker, who are from Whitehorse, who later on relocated to Vancouver and have been in Vancouver the last few years. And the other one, Northern Haze, which is from Pegnertung, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, up on Baffin Island. And they have been around for over 30 years and have only done 2 albums. So anyway, if there are any other bands out there from the territories that I should know about, kindly leave comments in the comment section and let me know. So during my research, I wrote down probably some 200 band names. I checked out well over 100 on YouTube and Bandcamp. I ordered albums by a few dozen bands, probably brought home some 60 to 70 albums. Some bands I ordered 2 or 3 albums already. And from those, I think just about every band sounded good to me. However, to make my top 12 list, there had to be something, that little extra something, that something in the music that made me feel like, ooh, yeah, this is the stuff. Or in other cases, just where I felt the band was doing something that was really unique. Okay, so now let's get on with the list. Who is the first band on the list? Let's check them out. Alright, so first up we have Wormwitch from Vancouver. Wormwitch was formed in Vancouver in 2015 by Rob Harris, bass vocals, and Colby Hink, guitars. The band is listed on the Metal Archives as being a black metal crust band, and they have released 2 full-length albums, Strike Mortal Soil in 2017 and The Heaven That Dwells Within in 2019. The song I featured at the beginning of this video was from this album here, The Heaven That Dwells Within, the 2019 album. And the song I just played from this is Midnight Sun. I can't remember how I found out about Wormwitch, but I'm really glad I did, because right from the first listen, this album really grabbed me. It is not just your stereotypical black metal album. There's so much more to it. The sound is really rich. There are some really nice acoustic parts, some clean vocal parts. And when I was listening to this album just a week or so ago, I actually was struck with the feeling that if Opeth had, instead of pursuing a progressive melodic death metal route that they did in the 1990s, if they had instead pursued a black metal route, probably somewhere in the late 90s, we might have heard an album something like this. Now, the black metal parts are really wonderful to hear, but there is so much more to this. There are places of complex riffing, clean vocals, acoustic parts, just everything cumulatively make this album such an audio treasure to listen to. This is an album I can listen to from front to back, and there are also some tracks that have those special moments that I really just have to have my full attention when I listen to it. A reviewer for New Noise magazine had this to say about the album. The record racked up some serious accolades, and many critics felt hard for the band's mixture of gothic folk, crust punk, malevolent black metal, and straight-up rock and roll. I have since ordered Strike Mortal Soil, and I'm sure I'm going to be listening to Wormwitch fairly regularly from now on. Okay, next up. Chinga. Alright, Chinga is a classic hard rock band from Vancouver, possibly from Langley, which is kind of cool if that's true. Chinga was formed in 2012 by Ben Yardley guitars, Carl Spackler bass and vocals, and Jason Solium drums. They released their debut album in 2013. They've since released two more. This one, Freewheelin' from 2016, which is a great album on its own. However, it was this one, Beyond the Sky, that earned them the spot in my top 12 bands. In fact, the song Killer Wizard is not only one of my most listened to songs of the year 2020, but the video is also one of my most viewed videos and most shared videos of the year 2020. I highly recommend watching the video for Killer Wizard because not only is the song itself killer, but the video is really fun and interesting. Yeah, I like this album so much, I wish I could get a t-shirt of this cover. That's just cool. And it's not only the music that's really good. I really enjoy a lot of the lyrics to the songs. For example, the first track on here, Nothing That I Can't Do, the lyrics start with bell bottoms, boogie shoes, feeling fine, sucker proof, bumps and bruises along the way, but I'm a born hellraiser and I'm here to stay. And then the first opening lines for Killer Wizard are, I'm a master of disaster, what you want, you bastard. Love it, that's great stuff. A review of the album on the Obelisk had this to say. Chinga make a strong case for themselves in these tracks and offer a reminder that a band doesn't need a ton of experimentalism or heady prog to entice an audience. They just need to make it sound like they're where it's at. And from their ass-shaking grooves to their stories about wizards and warlords and death riders and Mama Boogie herself, all things one might find painted on the side of a van that either is or isn't rockin' when you come knockin', Chinga most definitely do that. Okay, let's head over the Rockies to Alberta now. Arctos is a black metal band formed in Edmonton in 2014. They released a 3-song EP in 2017 and their debut full-length album, Beyond the Grasp of Mortal Hands, in 2019. Here's what their Bandcamp page says about them. Arctos is the voice of the mountains, the call of the rising wild. Inspired by the godless wastelands of northern Alberta, as well as the jagged monoliths of the Canadian Rockies, Arctos brings together a unique blend of sounds to craft a form of black metal rife with atmosphere and melody. The sound on this album is big. It's full, it's gripping, it's powerful, it's emotive. There's just so much going on in the music here. I really love this album so much, I went and bought an Arctos t-shirt. There's a symphonic feel that reminds me of Dimmu Borgir, actually. And the quintet includes a pianist in their lineup who contributes some piano parts not only to the music on this album, but to their EP as well, which gives them a kind of unique feel that I haven't heard amongst the black metal albums in my collection. When I listen to this album, I can see the evening twilight settling over snow-dusted mountains and foothills with copses of bare aspen trees and a solitary figure in the landscape dressed in a black jacket and bare hands, looking singularly resilient and powerful at the same time. Before we move on to our next band, I want to apologize to the city of Calgary for not featuring any of their bands in my top 12. There are two good reasons for this. One, some of the bands I checked out that I really liked were actually just a little bit too old for this list. And then some of the other bands that probably could have made it on this list, I just hadn't got their albums yet. Traveler is on order, Riot City is still in my Amazon shopping cart waiting to be ordered. And I'll tell you this, just up until a few days ago, Kron Goblin were actually on the list. But another artist came in and I had to choose and I went with the other one. Sorry guys, but I did like your album so much, I went and bought your latest release from last year. Alright, now we move across the prairies to Saskatchewan. This is Black Thunder. Black Thunder was formed in Regina, Saskatchewan in 2009 by Tony Frank vocals and guitars, Neil Lutz drums, and Dustin Weeb bass. Their music style is a trippy blend of heavy psychedelic, stoner rock, math rock even, and heavy progressive rock. They have 4 full-length albums to date, the latest being La Fine Criata, which was released in March of this year. The album reminds me of a cross between the Mars Volta and Seven Impale. The tracks are chock full of weirdly timed riffs and odd signatures, which just seem to come at you incessantly. Especially the track Tetris Syndrome. Listening to that, you can almost imagine yourself stuck inside a game of Tetris. Some tracks include a kind of spacey keyboard touch or a kind of what I think might be a synthesizer bass to give it a kind of Glenn Hughes funky groove feel in sections. I found Black Thunder on Kerrang's list of 20 Canadian bands you need to know now, where the music of their 3rd album was described as brimming with sardonic stoner culture while delivering on some good, filthy, heavy psych. Now let's head over to Saskatoon. Maelstrom Vale is a progressive death metal band formed in Saskatoon in 2014. The band's members are Lyndon Lapierre, drums, Evan J.A. Sunvo, guitars, Kurt Bergsma, vocals, and Andrew Lindsley, vocals and bass. Their Bandcamp bio reads, Maelstrom Vale bring a unique flavor of progressive metal to the table of your life, and they rock as hard as a band who has been around since the beginning of time. Maelstrom Vale are indeed a unique band. At first, you might think that they just sound like another technical death metal band, heavy technical riffing, growling vocals, but as you listen a little bit more, you will start to catch on to their progressive rock proclivities, perhaps leaning more to the jazzy side in places. Maybe you'll be listening to the first album, Disquiet, and you'll catch the kazoo solo, or the slide whistle used in one of the tracks. Then there is, of course, the song To Surpass the Gods, which has a waltz rhythm section in it. Or perhaps Fear of July, which has a 3-minute flute solo part, which might have you thinking that you've picked up a Camel album. Then there are, of course, the clean, and I mean smooth, clean vocals of bass player Andrew Lindsley. And there is the terrific groovy riff of the song Thulcandra Part 2, The Boogeyman. That riff has got so much swagger to it that even octogenarians with hip replacements will feel enticed to get up and dance. Watching their YouTube videos might give you the wrong impression. They look a little bit like a startup band that's still trying to feel their way. However, once you listen to the music, there is no doubt about the talent they have. I found it was a little bit like the first time I heard They Might Be Giants. There's this whimsical side, a bit of humor, but at the same time, the music is just so bang on and precise. I could not think to leave this band off my list, simply because they are outstanding, and different from anything else I've ever heard. Okay, we head further east to Manitoba. Wilt is an atmospheric black metal band formed in 2010 in Winnipeg, Manitoba, by vocalist Jordan Dorje and guitarist Brett Goodchild. The band is strongly influenced by black metal and doom metal and the vast open landscape of Manitoba and its often cold and harsh climate. Wilt released an EP in 2012 and then their debut full-length album Moving Monoliths in 2015. Reviews I read said that Moving Monoliths tends to lean more towards the doom side. So the band decided to move back again towards their atmospheric black metal roots for their second full-length album, Ruin. The original inspiration for the album Ruin was Cormac McCartney's book, The Road, about which they wrote a kind of loosely based narrative. However, during the writing process of the album, a close friend of the band's took his own life, and that really affected them all very deeply, and so there is that influence as well in the writing of the music on this album. One reviewer commented on how he could really feel the pain in Dorje's vocals, and how it felt like it was just being rended from his soul. Personally, I think the music on here is actually really beautiful. There are some very beautiful, sorrow-filled, but beautifully sorrow-filled melodies in the guitar, while at the same time you have the contrast of the harsh black metal vocals. But again, it is not an angry harshness. It is a kind of anguished harshness. There was actually another band from Manitoba that had originally been put into this spot here in the top 12 bands, but there came the day that I just really plugged into this and the music just swept over me, and I thought, I cannot leave this one off the list. So there you have it, Wilt and Ruin. And now let's head over to Ontario. Didn't work? Let's try again. Doesn't seem to be working. Okay, we're not getting any music out of this one. Alright, well, the reason is that before making this video, I sent out messages to all 12 bands asking for permission to use the music in this video, and I heard back from 11 of them. But I haven't heard anything from Freeways yet, so I'm sorry I can't feature any music in this video. I won't do it unless I have actual permission from the artist or the record label. So we're not going to hear anything from Freeways, but you can find their music on YouTube, so I do recommend checking it out. Of course, also you can find their music on Bandcamp as well. Alright, so let's talk about Freeways a little bit. Freeways is a hard rock band formed in Brampton, Ontario. They were formed in 2014 by Jacob Montgomery, guitars, vocals, and Sebastian Alcamo, drums, who are also members of the tech thrash band Droid. The other two members are Dominique Innocente, guitars, and Amao Amrith, bass. The band was formed around the concept of creating a band whose style would honor the likes of 70s classics such as Thin Lizzy, Blue Oyster Cult, April Wine, and also my favorite track on here, Dead Air, I feel has a strong Wishbone Ash sound to it as well, particularly from their classic album Argus. Freeways released an EP in 2017 of 3 songs, and then an additional song they wrote was included on a compilation album called Trapped Under Ice, which is a compilation of modern-day Canadian hard and heavy bands. Then this album here, True Bearings, was released in April of this year, 2020. I really like this album very much. It is more melody-based hard rock, so it doesn't really hammer home hard, but the music is just so easy to get into, especially if you're a fan of those 70s types bands. Also, they do say they have a bit of a new wave of British heavy metal influence in their music. I picked it up maybe mostly on Eternal Light, Eternal Night, the first track, but it could be argued that it's on here and other tracks as well. This is probably one of my most listened to albums out of what I picked up, just because I am a big fan of 70s rock, so it is like easy listening, meaning it's very easy for me to listen to this and enjoy it. But I would like to mention that Sarah Kitteringham, who I talked about previously mentioning Spell, she included this album in her picks of her top 20 albums for this year. So I'm in good company. In fact, I like this album so much, I went ahead and bought the download of their EP as well as that one other track. Really terrific stuff. This is great music if you're going on a long drive. Well, okay, it's not that long an album, so you might have to put it on repeat a couple of times. But great driving music, or for those really cool house parties with a bunch of friends that doesn't get too wild, you know, the cops don't need to come by, but everybody still has a good time. This is kind of like the soundtrack to that. So, Freeways, there you go. And now, let's change genres a little bit. Over the last 30 years or so, Canadian death metal has got a lot of attention worldwide for brutal death metal, melodic death metal, progressive death metal, technical death metal, but nearly all of those bands have been coming out of Montreal. And in fact, it was just last year in 2019 that Montreal was declared a world-class metal city. However, we're seeing death metal bands coming up right across the country, from Blackwater Burial in Vancouver to Endless Chaos in Winnipeg, and these guys here of Hatred Spawn coming out of Ontario. Of Hatred Spawn is a technical death metal group from Toronto, Ontario. The band was formed in 2017 by brothers Riley and JJ Tartaglia and features Oscar Rangel on bass and Matt Conducts Collicott on vocals. The band plays old school death metal, the likes of Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, Decapitated, and Dayside, but they also take on a lot of the more recent trends, particularly in the more technical death metal area, and as well the dual vocals, the one deep guttural vocals and then the more throat-shredding higher tone vocals. MetalTemple.com had these words to say about their debut album. Brothers JJ and Remy Tartaglia have forged a dying star heavy album that is brimming with pessimistic musings about the rot of humanity, all growled in an acid spit-fueled rage to the background noise of destroyed instruments. Of Hatred Spawn is death metal punctuated by moments of breakneck tempos and avalanching drum kits. The album aims to bury you 6 feet under with the 7,000 kilograms of sound blasting through your speakers in a relentless, battering attack that leaves your ears, eyes, and nose bloody. Yes, the album is that freaking good. Check out their videos and their music on YouTube and Bandcamp. Now, we head over to Quebec. Chthe'ilist is a death metal band formed in 2010 in Longueuil, if I said it correctly, and McMasterville, Quebec. Each of the 4 members have super impressive resumes, with all members having been in or are currently playing in several bands. Most reviewers are quick to point out the similarities between Chthe'ilist and Demilich. But for my personal taste, I find Cthe'ilist to be a truly phenomenal listening experience, much more so than Demilich. No disrespect intended. Chthe'ilist's sound... Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Cthe'ilist, as in Cthulhu, Cthe'ilist. The riffs, the slap bass, and the dual vocals of deep growls and slightly higher toned growls are occasionally joined by this voice that I can only describe as coming either from a pterodactyl or a human-sized raven. This is one of those albums that just give me that feeling when I listen to it every single time. This was one of my early discoveries in my quest, and I knew right from the beginning that this was going to be one of those albums to make my top 12 list. Several months later, it still thrills me to hear it. The review on Angry Metal Guy says, Chthe'ilist don't just borrow from old bizarre 90s death, but incorporate it seamlessly into their sound. A complex, cobweb-cloaked, and Lovecraft-worshipping blend of tech death and doom that defies both genres. Oh yes, I am in love. And now things are going to go from cosmic horror to ghosts in the landscape. Remote is the north, and long are its nights. Solitude is every man's friend, and doom his lullaby. Norilsk was named after the northerly mining and industrial Siberian town. The band was founded in 2012. The 2 main band members are Nick Mikulon, instruments and vocals, and Nick Richer, drums and backing vocals, together with other collaborators. The band's principal style is death doom metal with some post-metal and sludge metal blended nicely in. The band members draw their inspiration from the coldness and solitude of the north, which at first had me thinking that they were probably a black metal band. Their album Le Passage de Glacier was available for a special price along with Weepers of the Land, an EP. Both albums were recorded during the same sessions, and so how could I resist? I had to get both of them at the same time. The EP on CD also includes a bonus track which is not available from the Bandcamp download. Here are a few words from the review on their record label Hypnotic Dirge Records. Le Passage de Glacier is a very slow and heavy album. Norilsk have done an excellent job of marrying the weight of the world on your shoulders crushing feeling that I expect from doom and a very melodic vibe. The result is an aural experience that tears you apart because it's so depressing and beautiful at the same time. Before we move on to the next band, I'd like to say a few words about the maritime provinces of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. There were not as many bands readily found in those places, but I did pick up some really good ones like Blackmore, Holocaust, Throssenblatt, Zome, and Death Valley Driver. But unfortunately for the bands that I really felt could make this list, they were a little bit too old. They formed a few years before my deadline. And so, even though those bands were good enough that I'm considering buying or already have ordered a second album from some of them, they are not going to be featured here today. So instead, we're going to move up to the Rock, Newfoundland, and Labrador.
I had a dream last night. I wore your skin like it was.
Hag, or Hog, with the umlaut over the A, is the youngest band on the list, having formed just back in 2019. They released a single with a B-side, and then earlier this year they released their first full-length album. When I first listened to it, I was so immediately taken by it, I wanted to order the CD right away. However, I found out there was no CD available. Now, there were other bands that I really liked that had downloads only, which I thought, I'm not going to get them right away. I want the actual album on disc. However, Hag was just too good to resist. I was completely enraptured by the music, and I went and ordered the download, which opened the door for ordering other downloads. Hag is a doom metal band with some heavy psychedelic and progressive elements blended in. The music was good enough to get me, but it is the vocals of Claire Hipditch that totally enraptured me, enveloped me, and drew me into this world of ghosts, grim sleepers, dead house sparrows, and funerals. In particular, it was the eerie atmosphere of the song Your Skin that I couldn't resist, and that song has become one of my most played songs this year, along with the Chinga's Killer Wizard and The Wind That Shapes the Land by Unleash the Archers. But the album is rife with killer tracks. Just check out this part here from House Sparrow, their first single. Claire's vocals have that dark, magical quality that I really like about White Willow's vocalist Sylvia Skellestal. And the music of Hag reminds me of a bit like Blood Ceremony, but again like White Willow at their darkest and heaviest. This album continues to fill me up with these kind of haunting and dark emotions. It's the type of music that goes straight to the shadowy side of your soul and just makes you feel so darn good because you know it's so bloody awesome. Hey, we're not done with Newfoundland. Let's go check out another band from the St. John's area. Prior to commencing on this quest, the only bands I knew out of Newfoundland were Great Big Sea and Buddy What's His Name and the Other Fellas. Yeah, seriously. But thanks to the Heavy FNLD website, I got to know so many great bands like Hag, Category 6, Wizards of Chaos, Allagash, Emblem, Oceanic. The list just goes on and on. It's just incredible the amount of talent they have coming out of Newfoundland. I mean, it's like, whatever are you doing over there in Newfoundland? You've got such a great, talented bunch of boys and girls you have. Was that an authentic Newfie accent? I don't know. One band that I knew would be interesting right away was the progressive metal band The Combine. Now, I already mentioned them in my previous video because of their terrific video for one of their songs, Victory Road. The video depicts the band as a Star Trek-like crew on an exploratory spaceship going through the galaxy when they are stopped by an alien spacecraft and beamed aboard and forced to play for their alien captor. However, a beautiful girl, who is obviously a slave, decides to take things into her own hands, shoots one of the aliens, and wrestles with the other one while she gets the band members the remote control thing to have them beam back to their ship. It is really an entertaining and well done video. Now, I really wanted to check out this band's music more, and I ordered 2 of their albums directly from Michael Mercer, one of the band members. However, it took over 7 weeks to reach me here, and they just about didn't make the list. Once again, sorry, Kron Goblin. Anyway, the Combine. The band formed in 2009 with members Taylor Roberts, vocals, guitars, Mike Mercer, guitars, Matt Ball, bass and vocals, and Chris Reed on drums. The band relocated to Nova Scotia and have since released 3 albums, their latest, Void and Vessel, released in 2017. Sadly, this is also the band's final release. Due to the ravages of COVID-19 this year, the band have not been able to earn any income from playing live since they can't, and so it was decided sometime around the early summer that they would dissolve the band. Fortunately, I was able to get a hold of these 2 albums, their second album Wither and their third Void and Vessel. Now basically, Witness is more of a technical death metal album or progressive death metal album. There are much more growly, harsh, deep vocals in here, but there are a lot of also beautiful melodic parts. The third album, Void and Vessel, I don't really notice any growly vocals. However, the vocals, the clean vocals, have a bit more of a raspy, rough, kind of grungy edge to them. Both albums, although quite different from one another, are really excellent, and very glad I was able to get a hold of these. So that concludes my list of the 12 bands that I picked out of the several dozen that I checked out this year. We didn't cover any thrash bands. However, bands like Hazard, Terrifier, Holocaust, they were great. Didn't cover any power metal, but of course there is Borealis, there's Viathan, there's Ravenous EH, some other great bands out there as well. I just really couldn't cover it all. I really wanted to pick the bands that just sunk in the deepest. However, I am already ordering other albums by some of the bands I've checked out, and there are more bands on the list, so I think I'm going to spend 2021 digging deeper into the Canadian metal scene. Oh, and of course there are some great trad metal bands. Striker, I've already got 5 of their 6 albums now. Love them. Skullfist and Cauldron, got more coming up. Of course, I'm checking out Riot City. There's just so much for me to get into. So, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who gave me permission to use their music for this video. Let me check my computer screen. A huge thanks to Wilt, to Lyndon Lapierre of Maelstrom Vale, Nick of Norilsk, JJ Tartaglia of Hatred Spawn, Bruni at Profound Lore Records for Chthe'ilist. I think I got the name right now, finally. Colby of Wormwitch, thanks to Michael Mercer of The Combine, and I'm not sure which of the guitarists it is I'm in touch with Hag, but thanks to you, if you're watching, for always responding to my Facebook messages and for, of course, giving me permission to use the music in this video. Love your album. Waiting for another one. I know it's going to be another year or 2, but I'll be ready. Okay, and also to some of the last people to reply, Chinga, Black Thunder, and Arctos, thank you too for allowing me to use your music. I hope you enjoy the video that I made. And I guess that's it. So yes, a big thanks also to everybody who has been watching my videos. I don't have like a huge number of people out there, but there are people who watch, occasionally people who comment or like, and just over 300 subscribers now, so that's pretty cool. I mean, I'm not going for the big time, but I really appreciate everybody who watches these, because ultimately what I am trying to do is share some of the music that I have found, and I want other people to hopefully be able to pick up on it and maybe find something that they like too. And hey, that reminds me, as this is the holiday season now, if you're at time at home and if you happen to have a little bit of money, maybe you want to check out some of the bands that I mentioned today, or look at my last 2 videos where I also explained about all the other albums I bought. Check out some of those bands, buy some CDs, buy some downloads, buy some merch, whatever. Put some money the way of those bands, because yeah, it's hard times right now for everybody, and you know, a couple of bands have packed it in because of this, so we'd like to see them keep doing their thing. Okay, again, thanks everyone, and I hope everybody will have a much better 2021. I'll be back with some videos in that time, probably another 12 band feature that I would have normally done, but I'm going to do for the first video of January. Okay, thanks again. Bye.